You did really well.
I'm ambitious. I'm a hustler. I have my own lane.
That's the thing about comedy. You wake up every day, you don't know if you're funny that day.
So please welcome to the program. Let's go live, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Brother Shango and Milishaka. I think that's probably the best. Was that close? How was that?
Lamont King. Thank you for having me on here, man. The TShango and Milishaka.
TShango. See, I was thinking the T was silent.
No. But you got my last name perfect.
Oh, and Milishaka.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good to have you on. So talk to me. Reawakening the African Genius Mind.
So that's my name of the company that I run. I was a teacher for 15 years. And then I decided to open up my own company, understanding that the education program, the school system, the content, the methods, and the aim just weren't working for students. So I came up with a different program, a program in which we certify our teachers to teach in a much more effective and beneficial manner for our students and our children.
One of my favorite quotes, Malcolm X, is, only a fool will let his enemy educate his children.
Absolutely.
And a lot of us are familiar with that. It's in the simplest, plainest terms, easy to understand. Not much you can dispute or debate about it.
That's right.
But for decades, generations, collectively, we still haven't really done anything about that.
No.
What do you feel is necessary to reawaken?
Well, I agree. I love Malcolm X. Malcolm X changed my life. Of course, reading the autobiography of Malcolm X had a major impact on me around 8th grade. But, what's interesting is a lot of our great scholars like Malcolm and even other ones like Martin Luther King warned us against sending our children to our enemies to be educated. So I just want to say a quote real quick from Dr. Martin Luther King that I think people will be surprised about. Dr. King said, "White people view black people as inferior. A large percentage of them have a very low opinion of our race. People with such a low view of the black race cannot be given free rein and put in charge of the intellectual care and development of our boys and girls." He says, "I don't see school integration successfully happening right now and being beneficial. It will be disastrous." That's Dr. Martin Luther King.
And you rarely hear the harsh bars coming from King.
Exactly.
Yeah.
1961, he was considered a terrorist, man. So,
Wow.
like a lot of our greats, like Muhammad Ali, they don't really value him until after they can't talk anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. This virtual situation that we're all in, I feel like it's exposing everybody. It's exposing parents, exposing kids, teachers. It's really exposing teachers in a favorable light because it's showing us how much they have to deal with and how well they are doing with little, right? But to that point, we're seeing that, just the structure of the classroom is really not about making you smarter per se. It's more about teaching these young people how to just function as controlled members of society.
And that's it exactly, man. The other thing too is that I want to point out to all your listeners is that the schools are a deficit model. And a lot of the things that we face in society, especially for us as black people, are deficit models. You go to school, you hear everything negative about yourself. I used to get in trouble in school a lot, and my mother would be like, she was a teacher. So when the principal would call her or the teachers would call her, she would say, "Well, what do you have to tell me that's positive about my son? Every day you're calling me to tell me something negative." And as a teacher, what I do every year in the first week, of course, I introduce myself to all the parents. I even write a letter to them, and I tell them expectations they should have for me, expectations I have for them, and then expectations I have for their students. And I ask them to hold me accountable like I'm going to hold them accountable. And I call them in the first week, and I tell them a report about how great their child is. Because I don't want to move from a deficit model. I want to move from a positive model. I work out, I'm into bodybuilding, I'm also into martial arts, but for a fact, it's much easier to develop good habits than it is to break bad ones. And nobody wants to feel bad about themselves, man. I mean, another person we can quote is the late great Dick Gregory.
Hmm.
Dick Gregory said, I never learned hate and shame at home. I had to go to school for that.
There's a quote from Charles Cobb's book. This nonviolent stuff will get you killed. I want to read this quote very, very quickly and get your thoughts on it. I mean, obviously, it's in your email. Enslaved Africans were not marching on auction blocks or conducting sit-ins to secure a seat at the plantation manor dining room table. Rather, they were organizing surreptitiously out of the sight of white people. They planned sabotage, escapes, rebellions, or most often, simple ways and means of survival in the new hostile land. All right, so there is this debate when marching is not enough. In 2020, we still feel like that's a plan or an action plan that's going to do it. That's going to be enough. Marching and voting, and people who don't read enough compare what we're going through to our ancestors, and that they had a choice, and I wouldn't have been no slave, and it only took me 2 years to realize, no, that's not what was going down. They were plotting the whole time, and some were successful, some were unsuccessful. But as we approach 40 days out from the election, we saw what happened. Breonna Taylor, a grand jury decision yesterday. We're seeing that they're still shooting this week as we speak. You know what I mean? Is it time for us to really? And I'm not in that crowd of no tangibles, no vote. I'm not there. But how do we reset and restructure on November 4th, preparing for the worst? Because
So,
marching does not work, and voting is not the end all be all solution.
Lamar, I'm glad to be on your show because I feel like I can go in a direction that might be, a little bit more controversial here.
Go all the way in.
So, I think one of the reasons why we think solutions like voting and marching are viable is because we haven't had a proper education system. True education should it should teach us how to learn to obtain power. Not, it's not to get a job. And a lot of school is preparing us for jobs that don't even exist, right? And I think it's important that if we really studied history and we study great scholars like John Henry Clark, John Henry Clark, who read more books than most people read in a lifetime, or even see in a lifetime, he said back in the 1950s that marching was used up. In fact, his direct quote was, he said, marching was a waste of good shoe leather.
Okay.
Now, if we were taught about him in school, and he was a historical advisor for Malcolm X, him and J. Rogers, if we learned about them in school, we would have better methods, more effective methods in order to answer our problems. And a lot of people don't know. We use all these cliches. We do a lot. It really frustrates me how much black people shame other black people about voting. And particularly around this election here, because it's like, why don't you shame the white women who voted for Donald Trump to get him into office? That was the one that was the big surprise here, right? And it really wasn't even about our vote in the last one at all, right? Because he basically took the election, right? But you can see our own people don't want to challenge white power and go after white women for voting for Trump. They want to go after black people. But we have to look at it too. These slogans that we get. So one of the slogans that's thrown at us all the time is "Our people died for the right to vote."
Right. Yes.
Which is true, but it's also a fallacy of, like, I was on a debate team, and you realize our people have died for the right to be in school with white people, and that's not really working for us necessarily. Our people have died for the right to be able to go out and buy some Skittles with Trayvon Martin, right? Our people have died for the right to sit anywhere on a bus. In fact, there's nothing in American society we haven't died for.
Right. That's a hell of a perspective. Yeah.
So that is not the best statement. And when people say something like, our people died for the right to vote, I oftentimes think, yes, but they didn't die for the right to vote for the descendants of the people who killed them. And that's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, our people died for the right to be revolutionaries. So be a revolutionary. We'll put it in that different phrase. We don't say it like that, right? we don't say also that what our people actually fought for. Our people during enslavement, like it says in that quote that you just went over, we actually fought for the ability to be sovereign. We fought for the ability to be able to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, protect ourselves, defend ourselves, and heal ourselves. There's a large stream that you'll find about when we really read history. There's a great book called There Is a River by Vincent Hardin.
Mm,
And if we look at that book, it shows you that self-reliance meant the death of slavery.
okay.
Dependence actually means you're further under control. And that's what we learn in the school system, and that's what you're alluding to. They teach you to be dependent upon the opinions of the teacher. In fact, it's a reward and punishment system. Amos Wilson, who's one of my favorite scholars, he says if you want to control the people, control the rewards and punishments. The reason why Rittenhouse will be able to kill more people is because he right now is being defended as an American hero. So
Yes.
they reward their killers. They give their killers medals, and their killers are given free reign on killing us. And I listen to a lot of white conservatives. I went to an all-white school, so I've been around white conservatives. And what their idea is, number one, they think it's only a small population of black people who are being harassed by the police.
Mm,
That's what they perpetuate. That's the idea, right? And they say ideas like, well, we always hear, well, there are more black people killing black people than
right.
police killing black people. That we
Right.
hear that over and over again. Now, they don't want to mention the fact that we pay our taxes to the police. For them to kill us, that's not the same thing.
Right.
We're not talking about the same thing here. And also, what's interesting too, they say, well, if we didn't have police, we wouldn't have law and order. We would, it would be chaos. Now, I read the National Crime Victimization Survey, which was put out by the FBI, and they say there's no correlation between a large police presence and a decrease in crime. No correlation. That's the FBI reading their file, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They also say the FBI actually says that the first police forces in America were formed to catch runaway slaves.
Slave patrols, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were called paddy rollers, and they went around in paddy wagons,
Mm-hmm.
which is the same thing they have today. And if we really look at the prison system, you had Angela Davis wrote a book about prisons obsolete. You can read numerous. I know everybody should read the new Jim Crow,
New Jim Crow,
by
yeah.
Michelle Alexander.
Uh-huh.
And in that, she points out that uh, more black people are in prison today than were enslaved at the height of slavery in 1850.
Right.
And if we want to take it a step further, we should also look at the work of Claude Anderson, right, who did Powernomics.
Powernomics, yep.
And he says in 1860, at the height of slavery, 99.9% of black people worked for white people. And he said today, 99.9% of black people work for white people. There's been absolutely no economic redistribution of the wealth. And if we bring it back to education, today, with all the education, even for black women, who are some of the most highly educated in this country, the discrepancy between how much money they make and how much money white women make it would blow your mind. It's completely ridiculous, right? So the wealth income, I read one statistic. It said that I think for a white female, after wealth is her income subtract her debt, she was worth $31,000, right? It's not a lot of money. But then they looked at the black woman, and after you subtracted her debt for school,
Yeah, right.
she had $5. $5. Now, when the white woman married her, it increased to something like $161,000. For the black woman, when she got married, it increased to $31,000, but it still wasn't more than the white woman.
Right.
So, despite all the education, we're not changing the growth, or our economics are not increasing. Now, a living has, but just like Malcolm X said, if you're a butler and you work in the home of a poor person, you're not going to have nice clothing. But if the person you work for gets rich, all of a sudden you're going to be a butler who has nice clothing. And that's what's happened to us. Amos Wilson said we become highly educated servants at
Mm,
best.
mm. All right, so in all the stats that you just laid out, right, we still continue to, and I'm using the most basic terms. We still end up being taking the L and being the victims, because we're victims of a system. And since systemic racism was discovered this May in 2020, and America realized that was a thing.
It started with Donald Trump, right?
Yeah, right. Since we found out that systemic racism against there are those who on one side tear the system down, right? Rebuild. There's destroy and rebuild. Then there's the other ones. The only way you can fix it is from working on the inside. And then there's the third, I guess I've seen most common, through the summer, it's like ain't shit we can do about it. So it's like to the point of reawakening the African genius and realizing our value and our worth. Like I'm looking at discussions right now with Joe Budden versus Charlemagne and with DJ Vlad versus everybody else. Like at what point? How does that? I always had this theory that when you talk about sheep and sheep being asleep, sheep cannot wake themselves up. It's just like in the Matrix. Somebody had to pull your ass out of there. You can't do it yourself. Once you made aware and you're given a choice, then maybe. But for the crowd that's like, yo, it's really nothing we can do about it. I gotta go to work tomorrow. Like, what's the message to that thought process?
Well, it makes sense. Anytime we have something like COVID happen, something drastic, people either do two things. They either do less of what they were doing before, or they do more of what they were doing before. Well, reawakening African Union's mind, the purpose of us is to actually shift the trajectory. Like I heard a lot of people once COVID started, a lot of teachers were saying, I just want things to go back to the way they used to be. And I was thinking to myself, well, what was the trajectory of education before COVID? They were in the process of arming white teachers at predominantly black schools.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that really what we
That was
want to
like
go
last
back to?
year. That was like literally last year.
Exactly. Is that what we want to go back to? Is that normal? No. So what I'm arguing is there's some great black people throughout this country are doing great things. Black people need to create intentional communities. We need to also have codes amongst us where we reestablish our moral code. Because there was a time here, not too long ago, where we were the moral standard. And we need to rebuild that. And that's largely what my new book is about, which is called There Has to Be a Better Way. And in the beginning of it, it speaks to the fact of, like, I say African centered, but people are afraid of Africa. There's a strong anti-African sentiment, right?
Even still,
right? Which was the beauty of Chadwick Boseman's work in Black Panther, right? And Ryan Coogler. What I put in the book is, if we can't look at it as African centered because we still such an anti-African sentiment, well, let's look at it as great-grandparent centered.
Okay.
Our great-grandparents did not allow you to just speak to them any old way.
No, sirs.
You had to call them mister. You had to say sir, right?
Yeah.
My grandfather, unfortunately, he just passed away from COVID. But he's 91 years old. And the stories that he shared with me completely blew my mind. In terms of, he was, his father was a bootlegger of liquor and was, considered an outlaw, gangster, right? But they had a code.
Yeah.
And you didn't cuss in front of women, right? Even when he came to New York and Harlem, he talked about Bumpy Johnson. And when Bumpy Johnson had a code before he got into the drugs, right? And it was a very strict code that in Harlem, everybody would dress up to come outside.
Right.
There's an African proverb that says, where there's no shame, there's no honor. And you could flip it. It goes either way, right? But you could see in our lifetimes, right? We used to watch Jerry Springer.
Right.
And I remember sitting there and being like, yo, nobody could be this just nasty and have this much, like, just, no shame at all. Like, I was like, these have to be actors.
Right.
Then as time went on, man, it almost like that became the norm.
Yeah. And if Jerry Springer was on today, it'd be G-rated.
Exactly.
They'd be like, what is this nice stuff? What are you, you know what I mean?
It's exactly because it was like boiling a frog, right?
Right.
They slowly turned the heat up on it, so the frog never jumped up. We just got used to just complete disgusting things being shown to our children, and we go along with it, man. But it has to be people like you and I and the listeners who step up and say, "No, this has to stop." What you allow into your house is what you support, right? It's what you stand by. So if you're watching something, and this is something else. My elders used to do this all the time. I'm probably your elders too. But when we used to watch television, they would have commentary on the television nonstop, right? So we watching Good Times or any one of them shows, and my elders who were sitting like there was one father in the community that we all go to his house. My best friend, his father, most of us didn't have fathers. So we go and we watch television. But if you were going to watch television over there, you knew he was going to stop and have critiques on everything. And
Wow.
he would tell you, like, this television is trying to brainwash you. He used to call it a television program. He
Mm-hmm.
used to call it tell lies to your vision.
Tell
Right?
others. Yeah, my father used to say that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so there'd be a joke on Good Times. And he said, oh, a white man wrote that. And
Yeah.
we'd be like, what? A black man just said this. What are
Yeah.
you talking about? And he'd be like, no. I'm going to show you who produced, who's behind the scripts on these shows. And he would hip us to all this. And it just stuck, man. Just like little stuff stuck over time. And you had to have somebody there who would drop that type of commentary. And what ended up happening is we were able to analyze the world around us through his lens. And it really helped us. And today I have a class called media literacy because media has such a major impact on our
Yeah,
children.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I want them to understand, well, what are you looking at? What is the message that's trying to be conveyed here? And then on certain films that we analyze, it's for the older kids, I bring in them and I bring to them propaganda that is perfectly planned to get inside of our minds. And I'll give you a couple examples. Best Man 2, I thought was one of the best pieces of propaganda ever, right?
I never saw it.
Oh, okay. Man, if you do,
Yeah, because I saw it coming, probably.
yeah.
Probably because I saw it. I was like, I'm not watching that.
No, this one is subtle, man, because it had so many things in it that just grabbed you. One of the things that grabbed you was one of the brothers who's in it. The sisters like this brother a lot. I can't remember his name. He was in.
Morris Chestnut.
Thank you,
Yeah.
man. You knew.
I
But
mean,
Morris Chestnut's in it, and he's a football star. He's in the NFL. But man, dude is like 40, right? So it hits us because we always have these dreams. At 40, you still got the high school dreams. So
right.
you can get attached to it. The next thing, his wife dies from cancer. They purposely don't say what type of cancer she died. So what happens? All of us who know people who passed away from cancer, we get sucked into it, right?
Mhm.
And all of them are having issues, relationship issues, except for one of them. And I thought this was deep too. The only one that didn't have a relationship issue was the black woman who dated the white man.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, but everybody else, was dysfunctional, right? And there's one scene in it I thought was real deep where she's talking on the phone. She calls him, white boy is talking to her thing. He's talking also on the other line, but she's telling him about how crazy everything is, this, that, and the other. And she's like, I just wish you were here. I just wish you were here. Of course, he's right behind, right? And he had flown in, canceled everything. And they do this thing in these movies where, like, he was God, right? Where whenever you call, he'll be right there for you. And I show that to the kids in Django, where Django couldn't do any of this on his own, right?
Mm.
He had to have somebody who was in his ear who was teaching him. And then, that paternal white figure, right? So even with, as much as I love Black Panther because it showed the warrior tradition, as much as I loved it because it showed us just looking beautiful, dark skin, had the red, black, green hidden in there. Even there was subliminal stuff in there too. Like people don't realize Njidaka or Killmonger, Coogler said that he based that off Tupac, right?
Okay.
And you could tell even with the glasses he has on when he's in the museum.
Okay.
And his father is trying to break his mother out of prison, which was supposed to be Afina Shakur or Asada Shakur. And I didn't really talk about that, but Coogler wrote about it later. I had to do a lot of research.
Oh, okay.
So, and it was honoring Shaka Zulu's on my shirt, the point where he broke the spear in half.
Uh-huh.
And when he was going to fight against the Black Panther. And then later on.
That's right, because he revolutionized that. Yeah.
Shaka made.
Oh, I never. I missed
had the Seg guy was the long spear in the Zulu.
Yeah.
And the short one that Shaka invented was called the Ikhwa because that was the sound it made when it pulled your guts out. I mean, Shaka was a brilliant war strategist.
Yeah.
But if you realize too, that was supposed to represent a separation from tradition, which was a theme in the movie.
Okay.
He breaks it, and then later on in the movie, he's killed by that same spear. Right, that's the one that gets him in the ribs at the end. So it's like you break away from tradition, but you got to realize tradition is what gave you what you have. So those are all the deep things I want the children to realize. I want them to know each ethnic group and that the different outfits and everything came from, or their Dinka symbols in the back of her head and all that. I think that's an excellent teaching tool. But I also want them to realize, my wife and I wrote an article called Wakanda Trick is This, where they put in the CIA agent. There was no reason why they shouldn't have just put the little bead in his back, fixed him, and had him wake up in his own bed. He should have never came back to Wakanda. And the reason why I say that is, look, you see right now.
I mean, storyline wise, I think it still fit. I think it still worked. I
But
mean,
the challenge is this.
just as an ally.
Okay, now check this out. What's the relationship between the CIA and nations in Africa?
Of course. Yeah. So
How
now
many
we know.
nations has the
Yeah.
CIA overthrown in Africa?
True story.
And if Wakanda is such a brilliant nation, they don't know the history of the CIA destroying Patrice Lumumba. They don't know the story of the CIA destroying Thomas Sankara, or trying to kill and overthrow Kwame Nkrumah. They don't know about the CIA's involvement with Amilcar Cabral and Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. So,
But if you want to be authentic, that's how it happened. Some nice melanated individual opened the door.
But I just want children to watch
Yeah.
everything and analyze everything.
But this is a battle, though. So what you're talking about is like adult understanding, and you would wish that it wasn't, but it is, because they're not. There's no frame of reference to compare that to. Speaking specifically about your generation, our generation, watching TV with the elders, it was that done more than once by more than one person.
Yeah.
Whereas now you might get lucky as a child to come across somebody like you, but compared to everybody else that's in my life, and I'm 10, 11, 12, you a whole weirdo.
Yeah, I can speak to that exactly.
So
Right.
that's the challenge. That's a battle now.
It is, but it's also like you saw Elijah Muhammad said in the movie Malcolm X. You offer them the dirty glass of water and they're thirsty, they'll drink, right?
Okay.
But you offer them the clean glass of water and people have the choice. Most times they're going to choose the clean glass. And I find that the younger our children are, the less they are tainted with the nonsense.
Mm.
In fact, in my book, I even advocate that parents, with certain situations, you should tell your child about it. If you're struggling with a certain type of adversity, it's almost good sometimes to share that with your child, right? And see what they say about it. Because one, it teaches them how to solve problems. But two, you'd be surprised what your children say because they don't have all the fears and all the damage and the traumas that have occurred. So their answer will be, I want to say, almost like a lot purer. It'll be a lot deeper. You might have an issue, it's like, I got an issue with your aunt, this, that, and the other, and we keep this. And the child will be like, well, mommy, you should get along because this, that, and other. And you be like, I didn't even think of that.
You're right. Yeah.
So our children, so that gets back to when I say reawakening the African youth mind, is even how we look at our children. In the African tradition, we look at the children as their ancestors' return or the greatest gifts from our Creator. And that all we have to do is expose our children to the right experiences and keep them away from the wrong experiences. And then their light, their greatness, their brilliance, their genius will come out and shine through.
Okay.
Now, European education is different. I got a master's degree and I even started my PhD. But all the time, they were pushing the same idea that the children were tabula rasas or blank slates, that they were basically empty vessels and you're just supposed to pour information into their head.
Okay.
Now, think about how a teacher
That's what I'm used to. I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, and think about how a teacher reacts to that. The teacher who comes in, you ask them, "What do you teach?" They say, "I teach math." They don't teach students. They teach a subject, and they come in and they think they're just going to pour information into the child's head. Now, as African children, when we really study our children, we know they learn based off of relationships.
Got it.
So if I have a good relationship with you, I will learn. I mean, for me, they call me Baba TShango. Baba's like father figure, right? And they say, well, Baba TShango is passionate about reading. So I'm going to be passionate about reading. Baba TShango is passionate about physical fitness. So I'm going to be passionate about that. And that's why it's so important, like you just alluded to, that we put our children in front of our best. There's an African proverb says that if the village elders don't teach the children, the village idiots most certainly will.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now.
I don't care if it is